Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Routing Loop, a weekly show where we talk about AWS networking. And today we have a really special one for you all. Today we're talking about the hottest topic on planet Earth right now, which is generative AI and how it applies to AWS networking. I'm sure many of you are thinking how generative AI is transforming everything. So how does it impact AWS networking? And as network architects and engineers, how can we make ourselves more productive using generative AI? Those are the kind of things which we're going to talk about today. And we will also do a bunch of live demos. That's always fun. We'll see how generative AI reacts and does things live here. No filters, and we'll talk about all bunch of different concepts. Now, to do all of that, we have our special guests here, Sohaib and Brian. I'll hand it over to Sohaib and Brian to introduce themselves and then kick off the session. Again, let's make this collaborative. If you guys have any questions, put them in chat. If you want to see anything different, put them in chat, of course, related to networking and generative AI. With that, Sohaib, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sid. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our session. My name is Sohaib Tahir. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect from AWS Worldwide Public Sector team. I specifically work with US state local government customers, and I also have expertise in networking. I've been here in AWS for a little over 10 years, based out of Seattle. Right.
Yep. And hey, everybody, I'm Brian Lauer. I am a technical account manager at AWS. And prior to coming to AWS, I was a network engineer, network architect. So um, excited to be here today to talk to you about how you can use generative AI to uh, modernize your networks.
All right. So what?
Awesome.
Go ahead. So, so
No, I
what?
was just saying, let's get started. I'm bringing up your slides, Sohaib. So yeah, let's go.
So what we are planning to cover in this session, so we will do a quick overview of AWS Generative AI stack because we are going to use some of our AI capabilities. So just kind of, giving you high level of what these capabilities are about. And then we have prepared some practical examples and demos, like Brian said and Sid said, of using these AI capabilities for building networks, discovering networks, and analyzing AWS networks. And then we are also going to kind of close out on some of the AI best practices for AWS networking and how to kind of practically think about these technologies when it comes to AWS networking space. And like Sid said previously, we want to keep it interactive. So if you have any questions along the way, just pop them in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer. So with that being said, before we get started, we just wanted to get a pulse check of how many people who are here today are using or exploring AI for networking, specifically AWS networking or generally networking today. If you're using AI for any of the networking use cases, feel free to post that in the chat. Seems like we have some people. All right. So we keep an eye on the comments. So I'll kind of move on in the interest of time. So this is kind of a high-level AWS generative AI stack. We have a bunch of different capabilities. We normally have these three different layers. The infrastructure layer, where you can build your own large language models, not super important for the conversation today, so I'm going to skip this. The layer that we are going to focus a lot on today is going to be the Bedrock layer and then the Q layer. So starting from Q, we will do multiple demos on Q, Amazon Q Developer in particular. So Amazon Q Developer is a software development tool, AI-powered tool, and it has like a bunch of different flavors. We are going to focus a lot on what we call Amazon Q Developer CLI, and show you how you can use it for building AWS networks, deploying AWS networks, and analyzing your networks. We are not going to talk about Q Business, but you can still use Q Business in your networking workflows, specifically if you are building retrieval augmented generation architectures. For example, if you have a lot of networking images, documents, architectural diagrams, you can actually throw that in Amazon Q Business and then build a chatbot, and then you can make that capability available within your business to your network engineers or even your developers to ask questions about your network, and then it will return responses based on your business knowledge and your existing network knowledge. So that is something you can do. We are not going to cover that in this conversation, but we know there are customers who are also kind of using Q Business for that purpose. Amazon Bedrock is our generative AI layer. And Bedrock kind of also powers the queue. Bedrock allows you to select leading foundational models from likes of Anthropic. Amazon has our own Amazon Nova models, Mistral, Meta, so the list goes on. So you get a lot of different kind of models that you can use for building your own custom generative AI applications. We are going to look into one or two use cases on how you can use Bedrock, but Bedrock basically powers Q and other AI powered services as well. So that being said, let's talk a little bit more about Q Developer, because this is something we are going to talk extensively about, and we will see through some demo and how you can use it for building AWS networks. So Q Developer is a generative AI powered assistant for building and operating transforming software. And it comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. So you can have Q Developer in your IDE environment, such as Visual Studio Code. So you can actually install that extension, and then you can start using it within your IDE environments, and you can start, asking questions about your AWS network. It can allow you to write Terraform templates, CloudFormation templates. Basically, if you're already kind of invested in infrastructure as code best practices, especially for deploying and building networks on AWS, this is a pretty great capability to quickly get started and use natural language to start building your AWS networks and those templates that I talked about. And then Q is also trained on AWS documentation, so you can always use Q Developer to ask questions about any of the AWS networking services. As a matter of fact, any AWS service. But since we are talking about networking, you can basically give it your template, and then it can analyze it, and then you can ask follow-up questions, and then you can ask Q to add more features and networking components to it just using the natural language. The other thing that we do, security is AWS number one priority. So all these capabilities that we're talking about today, Amazon Q and Bedrock, they are secure by design, secure and private by design. So when you enable these capabilities, they are enabled in your account, so they are private by default in that particular region. And Q is specifically, since we're going to use it a lot, it respects your existing identity roles and permissions. For example, if you are assigning IAM permission to a user who's going to use Q Developer, Q Developer will only have access to capabilities that IAM role or IAM user permissions allow that user to have access to. So respect that policy and IAM permissions. And we'll show you how that works. The other thing is with Q Developer Pro, Q Developer has a per user kind of subscription model. So when you enable Q Developer Pro or Amazon Q Business, we don't use any of your data that you're using with these capabilities to train the underlying models or share that data with the model providers. So it's completely secure and private by design. And there are also private link endpoints. So if you are in the practice of deploying private link endpoints to access certain AWS services, there is also a private link endpoint for both Bedrock and also Amazon Q. So with that being said, I will hand it over to Brian for taking us through the QCLI.
So,
Thanks.
Brian, before you kick off, so if you had asked a question from our audience watching if they are using generative AI today. So we did get a few responses. Pete said they're playing around with creating templates for CloudFormation, which is a great use case. And then we also got some people saying they're using maybe some other stuff within generative AI, not necessarily the AWS stack, but they're experimenting with it. So yeah, looks like a lot of experimentation and usage here and there.
Okay, that's awesome. So it seems like our audience is already kind of playing with these capabilities. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And so with everybody having experience with working with large language models or generative AI models, there's also this thing called AI agents. So what is the difference between a large language model and an AI agent? Well, an AI agent can actually take actions on your behalf. So if you imagine, like, for people who are working with creating CloudFormation templates or CDK or Terraform, agents can actually interact with your file system, read your code base, make recommendations. It can then take those templates that you create, validate them, deploy them, troubleshoot if there's any issues that come up during deployment. It's a really powerful construct that really accelerates the workflow that is involved with deploying code and writing code and troubleshooting code and so forth. So next slide, please. And what we did here at Amazon is we developed the Amazon Q Developer CLI agent. So this builds upon that Amazon Q Developer capability, the generative AI powered coding agent that you have, so that way you can actually have the agent interact with your environments using the contextual awareness of your environment, your code base. You can provide prompt templates to give it additional proprietary context that's specific for your use case. And then you can have a natural language conversation. And in that natural language conversation, you can uh, get recommendations, and you can tweak those recommendations if you need to be a little more fine-tuned with your responses. And the QCLI agent is going to maintain that chat history. So you can go back to a previous conversation that you had, and you can say, hey, we had a conversation a few moments ago about this particular topic, and then continue to ask questions. And anybody who's been a developer uh, is likely familiar with the fact that development is an iterative process. So I know when I troubleshoot, when I'm writing code or deploying code, I'm always doing some development and then troubleshooting, and the CLI agent can take a lot of that heavy lifting and do a lot of that for you and accelerate the time from idea to deployment from days to weeks down to potentially hours to days. Um, so this is a really powerful thing that I see a lot of organizations transforming the way they work, and I'm very excited to show you a live demo here today of how I'm going to build a network from scratch using the Amazon Q CLI. So I have here my CLI terminal, and I already have pre-installed my Q Developer CLI agent. For me to start interacting with the agent, I simply enter Q chat, and then it's going to load.
Brian, just a second. Are you sharing your CLI?
I'm sharing my screen. When I switch over to the CLI, can you?
Okay. Yep. Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
And so now I can have a conversation with Amazon Q. And before I started this, I actually did create a VPC with some instances.
Brian, sorry. I think we're having some technical difficulty. I don't see your CLI.
Let me try to. Let me share my screen here. Okay.
And folks, while we're getting through this technical difficulties, stuff happens. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. I'm just going through the chat here, and I don't necessarily see a bunch of questions, although I see a lot of chat, so that's great.
I think there's one
Okay.
question that will this session be available as a on-demand video? I think the answer to that is yes, right, Sid?
It will be. I am not sure if it's getting streamed to YouTube at the moment. I think it's definitely getting streamed to Twitch, and then it's available in Twitch to be viewed after. All right, so I do see the CLI. Let me bring that up. Okay, Brian, you might have to just restart because you were not sharing your screen previously. Although your screen resolution is a bit small, so maybe if you wanna try to make it, yeah, just make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah, maybe even a bit more. Uh, yeah, that's good. Uh, at least the aspect ratio is better. So maybe just a command plus to make the font a little better.
Command plus plus.
Yep,
Does it
that looks
look
good.
better?
All right, let's
All
go.
right, fantastic. So thanks for your patience there. So getting started here, I have pre-created a couple VPCs just in the interest of time. One VPC is running a service, and I want to use VPC Lattice to actually make that service available to client VPCs. So I can interact with Amazon Q and say, I have a service running in a service VPC that I want to make available to a client VPC. Build a VPC Lattice service network for me. And then when I enter that, it'll say, okay, I'm going to create a CDK. In this case, I don't want it to actually create CDK. While I could have it actually create the CDK, for this, I want to actually just use a CLI. So I can interact with it and say, use the AWS CLI. And so it's asking me for permission before it actually goes and runs these commands. So I can give it permission to say, yes, I do want you to create this service network. And then it goes ahead and creates a service network. And then it has the context, right? So it knows that, hey, the next step is likely going to be associating the VPCs with a service network. And I can say, so in this case, it's showing me, hey, like you can go ahead and you can replace the VPC ID here and use this command, but I can just say, I want you to do it for me. Associate just the client VPC. So it's going to do some checks here to see. Uh, it wants to look at the VPCs and see, okay, what is the actual VPC ID? It finds the VPC ID for the client VPC. And then it says, okay, I've successfully created a VPC Lattice service network. I associated your client VPC with this service network. It can see that the association is still currently in process in the progress of initializing there. And it's asking me if it wants to continue with any next steps. Yes, I have a service VPC with an EC2 instance running a web application on port 80. Create a target group and VPC Lattice service for me. And so now it's going to do some additional checks to figure out, okay, well, what is the EC2 instance ID, so it can gather the data it needs to actually create the target group. This is a great example here. So it failed, which happens, but what you'll see here is that it's able to take that error message and troubleshoot it and retry, and now it's successfully moving on. So let's see, it is registering the EC2 instance with the target group, creating the VPC Lattice service. It sees that it needs an argument for the name. So it's going to retry and provide a name. And then it knows, okay, the next step is going to be to associate this service with a service network. So that way the clients in the client VPC can actually make calls to this web application. And it's giving me all this detail. So it's telling me that it was able to successfully create, all the different components, and it provides me with a DNS name that the client VPC can use, that VPC Lattice provides, so that way the clients can actually access the service running on that EC2 instance. So I actually created EC2 Instance Connect endpoints in these two VPCs. So let's try and see if the QCLI can log into this client instance and then run this a curl to this DNS name. So log into the client instance with EC2 Instance Connect endpoint and curl the DNS name. And it's going to run some show commands to gather some details, and it's going to run a it's trying to use Systems Manager. So then it says, okay, so it failed trying to use Sessions Manager, and it says, I'm going to try using the EC2 Instance Connect. So let's see.
Yeah, while it is doing its thing, one thing I would like to call out, so QCLI have access to your operating system, so it can actually run commands locally on your machine as well. And you might be thinking that how the QCLI has access to all these AWS services. So basically, in order for QCLI to execute these commands, you need to configure the AWS CLI permissions first through like AWS configure, or you can have like a profile setting that gives that user the permission. So it uses that permission to make all these API calls. So if you don't have those IAM permissions in place, then QCLI would not be able to execute these commands.
Yeah, that's a great point. You still have the power of identity and access management to be able to control, what you are doing, what permissions you have in the AWS environment. So yeah, let's try this command here. So it's providing me a command to do an EC2 Instance Connect, and then run the command curl the web application DNS name provided by. Yeah, and you can see it's doing a little bit of troubleshooting as we go along here, and then so it finally figured out here what it needed to do. The resolution doesn't look great here, but what I'll show you real quick is how you can curl. And you can see here that it gets a status 200, and you can see that it's providing the hello world response from the service instance. So you can see here in just a matter of a few minutes, I was able to stand up a VPC Lattice service network and add a service client VPC and provide that connectivity between those services. So that was a nice demo of how you can use VPC Lattice, how you can use QDeveloper CLI agent to develop a baseline network that you can then go and you can work with.
Awesome. Let's do a quick look at the chat to see if there's any questions here. I do see one question, which is an interesting ask. I just lost it. Yeah, right here. So let me bring it on the screen. So we have a user from Twitch says it would take a heck lot of trust to allow AI to deploy production resources for you directly. Coming from a world of multi-peer reviews and cab meetings, it's going to be a completely new world to me to do this, which is not necessarily a question, but I want to convert into a question to Brian and Sohaib is how do you see using this in like a production scenario? Do you see using like Q to make changes to production, or like talk to me about that?
Yeah. Um, I was going to talk about this in the best practices session, but I think this question kind of, brings that up right now. So, few best practices to think about. So, we are not saying that you should start doing this in production environment. Maybe start with your lower environments, sandbox environments, non-prod environments, so that you can learn this capability. How it operates in your lower environments and low risk scenario. And another best practice that we are seeing customers adopt is that instead of touching your existing networks, production networks, maybe think about using this in a lower environment to build something new, right? For example, Brian showed you VPC Lattice, which is also kind of a relatively new AWS service for building like multi-VPC architectures. So let's say if you're operating on a transit gateway network in your production environment, don't touch it with QCLI. Maybe try to build a replica of that network in a lower environment using VPC Lattice. So in that way, you're kind of minimizing your risk. You're learning this capability, what it can do, what it cannot do, all the rough edges. And then you can build like a kind of your own structure and best practices and blueprint that you can scale out to even higher environments once you get to that point. And and I think one thing that you saw in the demo is that every single step that this QCLI is taking, especially if it's destructive, when I say destructive means that it's going to create something or delete something, it is going to ask you for your permission. So it's not going to just go and automatically do it. So it already has human in the loop. So maybe where I'm going with this is like maybe you want to make these kind of capabilities available to your admins first, who know what your environment looks like, what certain changes can make, or what those changes can cause to your environment. So these are some of the best practices. So yeah, start from the. So I think to summarize, start with lower environments. Maybe start with greenfield in networks first before you kind of start looking into production environments. I hope that answers the question.
Yep, I think that's great. So just to summarize, rapid prototyping is where you want to use it. And then also what I've done is when I do rapid prototyping and I'm able to successfully build something and it works the way it should. For example, like Brian just showed you how to configure VPC Lattice and I did the curl and it's great. Then I can tell QCLI, hey, can you generate a CloudFormation template or a CDK template on everything we just configured? Because then I can use that, verify it, and that's what I would use in the production environment. Not necessarily have Q do things real time, but use a CDK or a CloudFormation which Q generated, and what would have taken me like 10 hours, 12 hours, I just did it in like 30 minutes, right? So that I think that's where the real power lies. We do have one follow-up question there. Fun by KK says, what Brian did looked so effortless and smooth. That was really cool. Is a rollback or backward process just as easy? So let's say you made a mistake and you're like, oh shit,
Mhm.
but hopefully you didn't screw up the production environment because you're doing this in your sandbox. But is there a way to roll back? Like what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I do this a lot actually. So I'll have QCLI build these different architectures that I can use for prototyping or putting together a demo. And then once I'm done, I can have it just go and I can just tell it, hey, go ahead and just delete those resources that you just created. And it'll, because it has the context of what happened during that session, it can go through and just, you know, delete the resources and bring you right back to um, where you started. So it's super easy to build your resources and also to roll back to previous state.
Yeah, because it has memory and context. So whatever it's doing along the way, it is maintaining that context. So when you ask it to roll back, so it will use the memory and the context to kind of roll back all the changes that you have done previously. So that's how it kind of works. I hope we
Uh,
answered the questions.
yeah, I don't see anything else. Oh, there was one thing here around what's the difference between EICE versus SSM manager. But I think I'll put that in chat. Just in interest of time, I think we should move on. So
Sure. All right. So I will take over the screen, if I may. So Brian kind of showed you how you can deploy like brand new networks, like VPC Lattice. I'm going to use CLI, QCLI to um show you how you can discover your existing networks. And I think this is maybe a safe use case, right? Even in your production environment. So again, I'm in the Amazon Q CLI console or in my CLI environment. The way you initiate the Q CLI is you just do Q chat. Before you do Q chat, you have to do Q login. We didn't talk about it, but you need to, there are two tiers of Q. There's a free tier which you can use, but it would not have access to your account and it would not have access to the full features of QCLI. But if you enable the Q Developer Pro, then you get access to all the features that we are showing in these demos. You can also select the models. By default, the QCLI uses the latest and greatest model, which is the Claude Sonnet 4 in this scenario. But if you have a preference for, let's say, 3.5, maybe it works better for some use cases, you can switch to it. I will continue with the Sonnet 4. So what I'm going to do is to kind of show a little bit different way of using Q in this scenario. So again, my QCLI has permissions into my AWS account. So what I want to do is I want actually the QCLI to discover transit gateways. I'm a transit gateway guy, so I have a lot of transit gateways in my account, at least in the maybe more than one. Let's see. So I'm basically asking it to discover, hey, how many transit gateways I have in my account. So it's basically running the describe call again. Describe call is a very safe call. It's not going to change anything. It's just going to list what is available inside my account. So you can see it execute this command, and it came up with this two transit gateways which are available in my account. And there's a primary one, there's a secondary one. It's giving me all the basic information about these transit gateways. And then I want to understand what are the routes available on these transit gateways. So I'm gonna ask it again, natural language, and I want to print the routes using the Cisco style output because I come from that world and I like that route table style. So it's going to basically again run some search commands, some describe commands. Again, very safe commands to execute. It's only kind of exploring your account and then collecting that information from the CLI calls and then producing the output the way I want to see it. So you can see that for two transit gateways in my account, the first transit gateway is just sitting there. I don't really have anything attached to it, and that's correct. The second transit gateway, which is my primary transit gateway, has 3 VPCs, and it is able to kind of list all the routes along with the attachments to those VPCs. So you can see that, just in like two simple natural language commands, I'm able to kind of discover the entire transit gateway stuff in my account. If I had to do this through a console, I would have to click through multiple console windows, go from one window to a different window, maybe go from transit gateway console to the attachment console. You can do it, but it takes a lot more time. And in this scenario, I just gave it a natural language prompt and it generated all the findings. And it also summarized what it's seeing. It's saying that the first transit gateway in my account, I created this and never really use it. Has no active route. So, I'm able to find that there's a transit gateway sitting in my account, which I can probably go delete because it's not being used. And then it summarized the overall routes on the second transit gateway and what those routes are about. And then also that these routes are propagated versus like statically created. Um, the other thing I can do, since we are on the topic of network discovery, I can ask Q to create an architectural diagram for this transit gateway architecture that it just discovered. So I use draw.io, which basically you can use XML code to create diagrams in that tool. So I'm asking Q to generate the XML code for the architecture that it just discovered through the previous prompts. And again, it maintains that context. So it's going to use that context to generate the XML code. It takes a while because I'm asking it to write the code. So it will take its time, sweet time to generate that code. And I did this previously, so it works. But so once I get the XML code, I can actually upload it to a draw.io, and then I will be able to see my architectural diagram. So it is able to generate this code. If you can see, I will ask it to basically I don't like the way it has stored like I said, the QCLI has access to your local operating system. So it stored this XML in this location. I will say move this file to download because I would have difficulty to find it otherwise. And it will do it. And again, since it's writing into my operating system, so it's asking me to give it permission. Again, it ended up moving this to the downloads folder, and I can show you. Let me see if I can share my other screen and upload this to draw.io. And let me switch my screen a little quick.
So while Sobs, you're bringing that, we have a question. The question is it best to leverage AWS MCP servers, like the public MCP servers, which AWS provides, or just use QCLI by itself?
I think there are use cases for both of them. There are MCP servers for AWS architecture, creating a AWS architecture diagram. So MCP server is definitely, if you use, for example, I've used the architecture one. It's trained on that data, so the architectural diagrams are going to be more accurate. I will say it will use the latest and greatest icons. The way I'm using it right now is Q is just using its default knowledge to generate the XML code. So if you want a little bit more accurate and more latest diagrams, then maybe use the MCP server for that. But if you just want to get, a starting point, then you can just kind of go with this QCLI. So I will say both have their own use cases and places. It really depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I'll just add that here, because you're using QCLI, you get access to the CLI and the AWS tools by default. If you were to build like a networking agent using Bedrock and you're hosting it on your own, and maybe you want it to do like multi-cloud stuff, then yeah, you will have to use AWS MCP servers, because you don't have access to the CLI or to QCLI if you're building like a independent agent. So yeah, again, use case dependent.
So you can see that I uploaded the XML code to draw.io and it generated this architectural diagram, which is fairly, on a high level, fairly accurate. I have a transit gateway, it has 3 VPCs. It even, put the route table on the side. Again, maybe not, ready to go for production use cases, but it gives you a starting point. It saves you time, right? You get productivity gains. If you had to put this yourself together, it will take a little bit more time, but you get a starting point and you can just make edits to it to see the way you want to see it, and then maybe ship it. So that's a quick use case on discovering your AWS network and then creating that architectural diagram. The other thing I can do is I can also ask Q to generate a cloud formation template from this. So and this is like one of the common use cases as well. And going back to the question that was previously asked, like if you want to still use your SDLC best practices, if you already have a DevOps best practice where you have code reviews and code testing, so instead of Q kind of running the commands directly, you can actually generate CloudFormation templates or Terraform templates from it, and then basically introduce those templates as part of your existing SDLC DevOps pipeline so that you're testing them in your lower environments. If you like them, then you can push them into production. So this is a safer way of even pushing changes into your production environment if you're not ready to just have Q make those direct API calls against your account. So you can see it actually created this CloudFormation template for the primary transit gateway because there was nothing on the secondary. So it kind of automatically created the one for the right transit gateway. And I will bring it up. So this is what it looks like. And it stored that in my local machine. Again, now I have this queue also in my IDE. I'm not authenticated, but I can actually log into this queue within my IDE environment, and I can start to chat with this CloudFormation template. I can add resources to it. I can remove resources from it. If you're new to your company, for example, you're new to the infrastructure as code best practices, and you already have created maybe previous people or your team have created those templates, a new person on the team can quickly use Q to explain the templates to them as well. So it can be a very good learning tool as well when it comes to learning these templates and understanding your existing networks that have been developed and deployed using your infrastructure as code best practices. So that was more of discovery, and then how that discovery can result into like different artifacts, including like network architecture diagrams and templates. One thing you can also do, you can modify your existing network. Again, start with the lower environment. For example, I can ask Q to add, let's say, a new VPC to my existing transit gateway, private transit gateway, and it will start doing that. And I said well architected, so it will basically create like multiple private, it understands the meaning of well architected. So it will create like the necessary subnets and then create the attachment and then attach it back to the transit gateway. It takes a little bit more time because it's going to create the VPC and make a bunch of API calls, but you can also do that. So once you discover your network using QCLI, then you can start to modify or even augment that based on what you want to do with that network. So in this
One,
scenario, just go ahead.
and I was just saying one thing I was gonna say is, here. So if you asked it to actually go ahead and create it, right,
Yep.
and you're basically now deploying this. What you can also do is you can ask QCLI, hey, create a plan around this, and don't deploy it yet, and just give me the plan. So that then you can actually see, okay, when you said well architected, what exactly is it doing, right? It's creating those subnets and etc. And then you can sort of verify that, saying, hey, this looks good, go ahead and deploy it. So you can also make it like a two-step process. One is asking it to give you a plan, and then two is the actual deployment.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I actually just give it a very high level, like a single prompt, so you can make it a multi-prompt or multi-step process too. So that's a great call out. So in this scenario, since I was already in that CloudFormation world, it added the new VPC CIDR to my CloudFormation template that it previously generated, and then it basically added that code, and then it went ahead and even basically deployed that CloudFormation template because I asked it to do it. But yeah, you can make it multi-step process and then make it part of your DevOps pipeline. And then it's explaining what well-architected features mean in this context. I give a very high-level single short prompt, and it basically decoded the well-architected into multi-AZ deployment, public-private subnets, which is the right way to do it, with NAT gateways, internet gateway, high availability. So it knows all the best practices, and it basically baked those best practices while creating this new VPC and attaching it to the transit gateway. Again, if you had to do this on your own through the console, or maybe running your own CLI command, it will take you much more time because you will have to run multiple commands, maybe switch between multiple consoles. So this is significant time saving from that perspective. All right, so this was more of a modification, discovery and modification of the existing network. So that kind of brings us back to the end of the Amazon Q, conversation as part of the session. I'll actually move on. Let me see if I can put this in a slideshow manner. So let's talk about Bedrock. So how you can use Bedrock for AWS network. So Bedrock, like I said previously, very briefly, that Bedrock gives you access to the leading foundation models from variety of different companies. For example, Anthropic, Amazon Nova models, Meta, Mistral, and the list goes on. And we have QCLI, which already uses Anthropic models, but let's say you have a preference for a different type of model, or you want to build your own network analysis capability using custom models. So that's where Bedrock kind of comes into picture, because it allows you to customize your models, select the model that you prefer, and that also helps you optimize the cost, right? Because different models have different costs, and you don't need to use the greatest and the most expensive and latest model for all these different use cases. You can actually select the right model for the right job. And that's where Bedrock kind of comes into picture. You can also build retrieval augmented generation and agentic workflows. So let's say you want to build a network analysis capability within your company, and you want to feed that capability your existing networking best practices, your documentation, your architectural diagrams, all of that knowledge that is sitting in your company, and you want the agent to use that knowledge to build any new networking capability inside your AWS account. So you can do that with Bedrock. You can build a custom AI agent using Bedrock Agent Core, create that knowledge base, and then feed all of your data, and then put a model, and then now that model can respond, not only using the AWS knowledge, but also your company business knowledge and your private networking knowledge in your account. So you can do things like that with Bedrock. And again, it has the security, privacy, and safety controls. Like I said, for Q, whatever data you're going to use is only going to stay in your account. You can encrypt it in transit, encrypt at rest. Bedrock is also FedRAMP compliant, SOC compliant, HIPAA compliant, and any data that you're going to use with Bedrock service, either in a RAG type of architecture, or you customize the model. That data is never used with the underlying model providers or to train those foundation models. And then you also have guardrails in Bedrock. So if you want to block certain kind of prompts, for example, you don't want your this custom network capability to return AWS accounts, you can block that access, that kind of response from the model using Bedrock guardrails. So you also have the capability to customize a lot of the things in your own way. So I have a kind of a quick demo on this, on how you can use Bedrock, just to show you the art of the possible here. Again, you can do all of this with Q. I'm going to switch the screen. I will go to the Bedrock console. So Amazon Bedrock, you just, again, you have to be inside the region. I'm in the North Virginia region. Since this is a kind of basic demo, I will close out all these notifications and then go into the chat playground. Again, you can build your own custom interface and then select the appropriate model and then use Bedrock APIs to integrate that custom web page or application, and then pass those prompts to the model using API calls. But I'm using the console because this is a quick demo. I'm going to use the Anthropic 3.7 Sonnet model. And what I'm going to do is I have a network architecture that I want to basically analyze using Bedrock. So this is a network architectural diagram. Let me actually show this to you as well. Let me open this in a browser. So this is fairly common. Like I said, I'm a transit gateway guy, so I always pick transit gateway examples. So I'm biased in that way. So anyway, so this is a fairly common transit gateway architecture where you have multiple VPCs, prod, non-prod, maybe third-party VPC for integrating third-party applications running on AWS. You have like network segmentation going on within transit gateway with multiple route tables. You have a security VPC with network firewall endpoints, which can inspect the traffic between the VPCs. And then you also have like a VPN and direct connect. Fairly high-level architectural diagram, but common architecture. And I want Bedrock to basically analyze this for me. So I'm going to give a very simple prompt and have Bedrock basically analyze this. It takes a little while. Hopefully, I don't run into any throttling issues because I have an internal account, but it can happen. Then I can switch the model in that scenario. So this is something you can do. So the purpose of this is that I'm trying to show you that you can do this today. If you are not ready to use QCLI and you want to quickly start using AI for network and analysis, this is one way to do it. Let me see. It's taking a little bit more time. So let me come back to this console. Yeah, this can happen because I have some throttling going on in my account, but hopefully this works. Any questions, Sid, in the chat while I'm kind of doing this?
I don't see any questions now, but we're getting some great comments. People are really liking it overall. So
Okay.
definitely cool demo. So hopefully this works. I know live
Yeah.
demos are always a bit tricky.
Yeah, this is like the chat functionality within Bedrock kind of gets the lowest priority. So it's kind of
Yeah.
expected. So it's
And it's
not
an
like,
internal account. Yeah, it's an
yeah.
internal account, guys. So we try to prioritize real customer traffic, and some of the internal fun stuff which we keep doing
Yep.
sometimes gets deprioritized. So there
Let
might
me
be
see.
some of that going on.
Yeah, no, that is exactly true. But I got it. I ran into the same problem when I was testing this last night. It worked maybe one or two times, so I was kind of hoping this works this time around. Let's see. I'm trying it one more time. Other if it works, it works. Okay. Model identifier didn't work. Oh, I don't have access in this region. Let me go back to.
Yeah, let's try.
I'll try one more time. If this works, awesome. If not, I think we have kind of showed you the art of the possible anyway.
Or maybe we try to change the model. Maybe you
Yeah.
want to try using maybe Nova or
Oh, it
no,
worked.
there you go.
It worked. It worked. Yeah. So you can see that, I just gave it a very simple prompt, analyze and explain the network architecture in detail. So it generated all these findings. It was able to correctly identify all the VPCs, the security VPC, their CIDRs, the transit gateway, the internet gateway, network firewall, the transit gateway ENIs, It is also able to understand the routing configuration that was there in the architectural diagram, also the security implementation through the network firewall. So you can see that in a single prompt with this architecture, I'm able to kind of generate all these findings. So a good use case is that, let's say if you're a network engineer and you have to send this information to your coworker or a new person on your team, instead of you kind of writing this entire thing in an email, you can just upload this, ask Bedrock to explain it to you, analyze it. Obviously, I will review the information for correctness before shipping it out to anyone, but you can put this in your email or in your documentation and ship it. So with a single prompt, you're able to analyze this architecture in a quite more detail. And then I can also ask it follow-up questions. Hopefully this works. How can I improve this architecture further? So it can actually generate some findings on how I can improve this. For example, it's saying that, hey, you can use gateway endpoints, which is again best practice. So if you're using S3 or DynamoDB service in these VPCs, it's the best practice to use gateway endpoints because it minimizes your costs. It's also giving me advice on using interface endpoints for where necessary to avoid public internet, which is again AWS best practice. It's also generating some other best practices around enabling flow logs, enabling CloudWatch metrics and logs, network access analyzer. I'm not going to go through each of these things, but you can see that it's providing me a lot of these best practices, which are very actionable, which I can take and maybe if you want to create a long-term roadmap on how you want to improve and evolve your network, starting from that initial network architectural diagram, I can create that roadmap using this kind of analysis and recommendations. And one thing it can also do, which I don't know if you have time to do it, it can also generate some cost estimations. Cost estimations can be tricky because it may not get it 100% right sometimes because it makes certain assumptions. And LLMs generally are kind of may or may not be accurate with mathematical functions. But you can do that as well. Maybe let me try if I can do it as a last thing to show you. But let me run this one more. Hopefully it works. But I've done this multiple times, and again, it gives me a great starting point. Um, no, and I will always validate the numbers and the output this is generating. So you can see that at least on a high level, it detected all the 5 VPCs. It's actually right that there's no charge for VPC creation. It's actually calculating the transit gateway hourly attachment cost 36 per month is correct. It assumed a very high data processing, which is 100 terabyte, which is I think on the higher side. You can tweak this because it made certain assumptions. I did not give it any assumptions, so it just assumed certain things. You can say, hey, reduce this to 1 terabyte, and it will change the numbers. So it created the transit gateway cost, the NAT gateway cost, network firewall. There's no internet gateway, but there's a data transfer out, so it basically detected that. But yeah, you can see that it kind of created all this cost structure based on a very single high-level prompt without me providing any like details and assumptions. But you can tweak these assumptions and you can use that as a starting point. Again, I will always recommend to verify these numbers and validate before you share them out with anyone else. But again, gives you a great starting point. That's the purpose of this.
All
Anyway, with
right.
that, we are towards the end
We
of our session. Go ahead, sir.
Now I was just going to say we have a quick question, which is I think quite relevant. So you have shown this in Bedrock console. How about Amazon Q? Can you do the same thing in Amazon Q?
Yes, you can do a lot. Brian, you want to answer that? Seems like you have an answer.
Yeah. And this is something I do actually all the time. So I will use Amazon Q Developer CLI to ask questions about cost optimization, security recommendations, reliability recommendations, and it can give you a you know answers based on your environment and recommendations on what you can do to improve your environment. So yeah, very powerful use case for Amazon Q Developer CLI as well.
And I'll
Yeah,
just add that what Sohaib showed you obviously was direct interaction with an LLM. I did not have access to any tools or MCP
right.
servers, right? So when you're using QCLI, you could have actually said, "Oh, this is great. Can you go build this in my account?" And because it has access to your account and the AWS CLI, it can actually execute, those commands in your account and actually build it out, which you could not do from Bedrock. Also, for like the
Yeah.
cost assumptions, we do have a AWS cost MCP server, so you can add that to QCLI, and then that would be much more accurate than relying on Claude Sonnet's training data, because APIs and the costs change all the time. So it can go reach out to the AWS MCP server for the latest pricing info and then use that. So all of that will be much better when you're using like an agentic tool like QCLI, which has access to a bunch of these MCP servers and tools.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the only use case where you want to use maybe Bedrock is if you want to select custom models and you want to build your own kind of network analysis capability with your own kind of HTML interfaces, and you want to give access to your own data. Even you can use MCP server for that as well. That's where Bedrock may be handy, but you can do most of this stuff. Actually, all of this and even more with QCLI.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. Okay. We have roughly 4 minutes, so
Yeah, I will summarize. This is the last slide. I think we talked about some of the best practices. I will reiterate that start with the safer use cases first, such as bootstrapping networks or building greenfield networks in lower environments. Start experimenting with AI tools again in non-prod environments, in your staging environments, and maybe start with the discovery side of the house first. Use these tools to discover your network, maybe create architectural diagrams before you start to even make more like changes like creation and deletion of resources or modification of resources. So some best practices: always use human in the loop option. You saw in the QCLI that it anytime it wants to make any major changes to your environment, it will ask for your permission. So make sure that you're kind of using that to your favor. You're analyzing what Q is going to do before you kind of give it permission to go and do that stuff. Prompt engineering is very important to get the right outcome from these models and these capabilities. Both me and Brian showed you some prompts. We kind of use a single short prompting strategy here, where you just give like a very small prompt, very specific though, right? And then had like a follow-up prompts to kind of direct the capability on what we want it to do. But you can actually give a very large prompt as well, and you can even use system prompts to kind of give the model the context on what you're trying to do. So use the prompt engineering to your favor, because that directly has an impact on what the model is going to do and the output you're going to see. There are cost considerations for sure. In what models you use, like Bedrock allows you to use a different type of models, so you can optimize your cost. Q use the Anthropic model, so you have only two options, the 4 and the 3.5, like I showed. But the benefit with Q is that Q is per user pricing, so you can use the developer pro, and then you can maybe start enabling it for your admin or network administrators first before you roll it out to the rest of the people. And then I already talked about you can configure guardrails to block any harmful content or any output that you want to protect, like let's say PII data or AWS account information from any of the responses from the model. So use that as well. And if you build your own networking capabilities using any of these like Q functionality or Bedrock functionality, we would recommend you to always use generative AI lens of the well-architected framework to basically review all the best practices. And some of the best practices I mentioned are also documented in very detail. So use that to your favor. It's available in the console as a self-service kind of capability. So if you're building your own AI applications, always do the well-architected review using the generative AI lens before you push them out to production. And with that being said, this brings us to the end of the session. I know we have a few more minutes to go, so happy to take any more questions.
yeah, I think we have just one question here, but I think you already answered it. It's three questions, all on the same sort of angle. If you go back to the previous slide, so the first question is, can we trust Q? The follow up there is, what if I create an infrastructure which has security flaws using Q? What will happen? Will it warn me? So I think all of in the interest of time, I think you just talked about a couple of things in your best practices. One was, you can obviously use guardrails to block if there's something harmful there, but also whenever you're building something, agents will not have a bad intent, but then you never know like what they are trained on. So you want to make sure that you are telling the agent what the best practices are. So your final one here, like the well architected framework best practices, you want to make sure that as you're asking it to build, let's say, a transit gateway architecture, ask it to build it in a well architected way. Maybe point it to some documentation Sohaib does a whole bunch of blogs, by the way. Point the agent to Sohaib's blog saying, hey, just read what Sohaib did, suggested in this blog, and use that to build the architecture, right? So you have that responsibility, and you can do better prompt engineering and guide the agent. So with that, I think we are at the end of time. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will be back next week, same time, talking about AWS networking, but something different.